back in 1969. It was a strange place. We know from a surviving press release from a company called IBM, who in February 1969 outlined that they were putting, as they termed it, the world's best supercomputer into mission control at Cape Canaveral. They boasted in that press release that the world's best supercomputer had an astonishing 6 megabytes of memory. Remarkable, really. The Eagle landing craft that Neil and Buzz stepped out of onto the surface of the moon, it's on the slide already. 64 kilobits of computing power. That was the world in 1969. And yet we put man on the moon with that. To indicate how change has happened in our lives, your toaster in your kitchen, ladies and gentlemen, if it knows the difference between frozen bread and ordinary bread and can toast both slices appropriately, today your kitchen toaster has more computing power than mission control and the whole of Apollo 11. If you're looking closely at the slide, you'll notice that the image is not even a real toaster. It's a USB plug-and-play toaster. Comes from my favorite website in the world, firebox.com. Those are the USB slots go in there. You plug it into the side of your laptop or your whatever it is that you're plugging into. 64 gigs of storage and an SD card slot, so you've got somewhere to store all those selfies, Jackie, that you were talking about earlier. That's $9.99 if you order it today. Free delivery if you order before midnight for 64 gigs. Our world's come a long way, ladies and gentlemen. So from computing that became more accessible in the 70s, we jump forward now to the 1980s, the era of communication. That was a mobile phone in 1985. It weighed more than 4 kilograms, had a talk time of 20 minutes, and required a 24-hour charge. It was remarkable. 5 million people had one of those mobile phones by December of 1989, around the world. And today, of course, mobile telephony is ubiquitous. There's a recent demonstration, not in downtown New York, but in Hong Kong, where the symbol of international protest now is to hold up your smartphone and turn on the flashlight feature. And it's remarkable today, your smartphone, like mine, has an average lifespan of 20 hours talk time, perhaps 2 or 3 days on charge. And none of us get really excited about mobile phones today because 7 billion people have a mobile phone right now. And today, whilst we're here at the conference, by the time we go home this evening, another 5 million handsets will have been sold. Not the 5 million that existed by December of 1989 in totality. We're now selling around the world 5 million handsets a day. But let's jump forward and look at even more change. From the 70s to the 80s, to the era of connectivity in the 90s, when the web was born. Everyone was quite excited about the internet, even at 14K dial-up speeds. And would you believe by the end of the 1990s, there were only 16 million people connected to the internet. Today, of course, very different story. Broadband is ubiquitous, 4 megabit per second broadband download speeds, and over 3 billion people now connected to the net. It's changed everything. No wonder Jackie's talking about what she's talking about, because of course it makes sense that we're living in a new world and we want new ways of doing things. Into the era of collaboration and the 2000s as the 21st century dawned. We've talked about the impact of social media already. In June 1995, when Facebook hit, 2005, I beg your pardon, when Facebook hit 100 million users, people started calling Mark Zuckerberg a god with a small g. What's remarkable about it today is that, of course, we've come a long way since 100 million Facebook users. Today, there are 1.9 billion people who use social media as their primary form of communication. It's become ubiquitous all the way around. And last year, at the end of last year, Facebook announced they were quite happy with the press release on one particular day when 1 billion people logged onto the Facebook platform within a 24-hour period. That doesn't make news anymore. More than 1.5 billion people a day log on to YouTube. It's become totally ubiquitous. by way of thinking about change into the new world, not struggle with outdated stuff. And that's why, where we find ourselves now, rapidly approaching the end of 2016, the IT boys in the house are talking convergence. And in fact, everybody ought to be talking convergence, because all it really means is we find ourselves now towards the end of 2016 on the road to 2020, where everything has literally converged into one place. One-click discoverability is the order of the day. Everything is now wherever you are. And we need to respond to that in terms of our own lives. If you have children, ladies and gentlemen, don't repeat the mantra of your parents. Tell them this rather. Today, the more things change, the faster things change. Those 5 ingredients have come together to make us realize that we cannot behave like number 1. We need to start getting active. We need to start gearing up our lives, our businesses, into a new world that demands totally different things from you. I wanted this morning to give you a quote from the Executive Vice President of Marketing at Google, who said about 10 or 11 months ago an amazing statement. On a digital radio interview, I overheard him say this: innovation that used to take a generation is now happening in weeks or months. I think, Jackie, what you spoke about this morning is testament to that in your arena, ma'am, as well. Because innovation is everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. It drives our economic landscape forward. It drives our political landscape forward, our social landscape. There is no escaping it. But I'm a little embarrassed to give you that quote, because it's already out of date. 1 week after making this announcement, Google reinvented themselves and became known as the company Alphabet, leaving business analysts kind of scratching their heads, wondering what on earth that all meant. And the founders of Google said, really, it's quite simple. In a world of constant innovation, we intend to have a business running A through Z through the alphabet. Every single company that we have will be a letter from within the 26-letter alphabet. Google is just the G. A, for example, autonomous or self-driving vehicles, which are rapidly becoming a reality. I had the privilege of speaking with a Jaguar Land Rover dealership conference around the world a couple of weeks ago. I just bought myself a brand new Land Rover Discovery 4 a week before the event. I wish I hadn't now, because at that conference on their stage, Land Rover Jaguar announced that they expect within 10 years the vast majority of their vehicle production will all be electric-based. It's wild. And when you think about it, in the world of construction and the world of engineering, wherever we are right now as an architect, I watch giant malls going up around the world, a testament perhaps to the consumer society. Are you building malls though with 8,000 parking bays and 4 drop-off zones? Because 10 years from now, when those malls are still standing, ain't nobody going to be parking their vehicles in your underground parking bays. They're going to be doing something completely different. Those cars will be coming and going, and the drop-off zones will be all important. The world is changing, ladies and gentlemen. One of Google's statements is they expect to double the human lifespan with all their investment into technology in those fields right now. They believe humans will live naturally to the age of 150 years. And if that sounds scary enough, they also announced at the same time as trying to double the human lifespan that they believe those human beings who will live to 150 years old naturally are already turning 13 in 2017. Change is coming. And what we need to realize is that we don't respond to it terribly well. I want to share with you the psychological curve of change, and I apologize, at 9:31 with 14 minutes to go before we start our new program, for having to take you through a psychological curve of conscious versus unconscious behavior. But I think it's relevant to where we are this morning, so I'll beg your indulgence, if I may. It's the way we learn, and more importantly, the way that we stop learning. You see, as humans, apex predators, top of the food chain, were there but we had to begin by learning whatever it was that we went into. And the basis of learning is the bottom of the pyramid, where in psychological terms, you're known as being unconsciously incompetent. You don't know, in layman terms, you don't know what you don't know. Let's use the example of learning to drive, seeing as we're speaking about vehicles a lot this morning. When you were 7 and somebody threw you the car keys and said drive, you couldn't have done it even if they'd done so, no matter how long your legs were, because it's a learned, complicated mechanical behavior. We start as learning everything in that same stage, unconscious and incompetent. I don't know what I don't know. And then we get older and someone gives us driving lessons. At which point, when you begin to learn that process, the psychologists say that you become conscious of your incompetence. You know what you don't know, which is why you struggle to manipulate the engine to get through the system. You jerked and stalled the vehicle a couple of times, found it difficult to brake or accelerate appropriately. But you were conscious of your incompetence. But then again, remember, we're apex predators. We learn this stuff. We can get to that point of being able to prove what the psychologists call conscious competence. That's your driving examination, your driving test. And do you remember how nervous you were when you went to take your own driving test? Have I learned enough? Have I got that stuff together? Am I going to be okay? And you went through the driving procedure, and whoever it was that took your test with you, eventually, on whatever time that they said it was, your first, second, third, 17th, doesn't really matter. You heard those words. Congratulations. You're going to be licensed to drive. Do you remember how good that felt? Get in touch with your own feelings for a moment about the way you felt when you passed your driving examination. I got a license! Yes! You wanted to tell the whole world, and rightly so. You'd been declared by an independent expert as being both conscious and competent, and it felt damn good. You were the best driver in the world the day you passed your driving test. You were doing it by the book. You were stopping at stop streets, putting up the handbrake at a traffic signal, indicating when you were turning left or right, even if you were driving a BMW. And if you ever thought your own job was worthless, ladies and gentlemen, remember that around the world there are some people employed in BMW factories to install indicators on those vehicles. Strange job. So why wouldn't the insurance firm, having just had you known and declared as being consciously competent, why wouldn't the insurance company give you the world's best insurance deal the day you passed your test? Because they know what's coming next. The biggest piece of our slice of pizza, if you will, in our pyramid. They know that we were the best drivers in the world for about 2 weeks. And then we slip into unconscious competence. I don't know what I know. If you drove here this morning and you hadn't passed your driving test within the last 2 weeks, I put it to you that you drove here in an unconscious fashion. Perhaps sending a text message on your mobile. Underneath the dash now, in case the cops are around the corner or just over the next hill. Putting on your makeup as you were driving to conference. Reading your tablets. Unconscious competence. It's the most dangerous place in the world to be. And 2 weeks after we learn something, as humans, we sadly flick that switch and it moves into default. We become unconsciously competent. We don't respond to new things very well. Hey, I've learned it. Next! Bring it on. I can drive. Let me learn the next thing. It's the same at work, ladies and gentlemen. Do you remember when you signed your contract letter? When you started your business? That day when you got hired or began your company? Yes! I've done it! I got the job! Do you remember that day? Anyone wake up feeling that way this morning? Unconscious competence. True excellence, right up at the peak up there at Everest. Well, that's conscious excellence. That's a NASCAR driving champion. 16,000 hours of dedicated, conscious practice. And most of us give up after 2 weeks. Sad, really, isn't it? But I'm not here to depress us, ladies and gentlemen, because I believe that 99.9% of us live in this world of absolute unconscious competence. I'm not going to say get out there and put in 14,000 hours of dedicated practice to build your small business. I'd rather move backwards just a fraction, back into that arena of being conscious. Because if we pull ourselves back to conscious thinking, we're going to leave 99.9% of the rest of the planet behind. It really could be that simple. You see the change curve. We're not good with change, as I've mentioned. We struggle a bit with it. You know, when change is announced, the end result should always be a little higher. And we all got taught at grade school the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So theoretically, you announce change, the end result comes quickly. But it doesn't for humans. We go through this incredible curve, ladies and gentlemen. And every single one of us goes through it. It's not just in business. It's in life. Should you get divorced, should tragically somebody pass in your family, we go through a curve where we don't respond to change terribly well. And here's how it works. Firstly, change is announced. The initial response, surprise! And just over the horizon, the storm clouds start rolling in, the thunder, the lightning. What do you mean I've got to do it differently? I always thought we'd do it the same way. I didn't ask for this change. And we begin to slip down the curve. After your initial surprise, the next human natural response is frustration. I never asked for this. I didn't want this change. Who the hell came up with this as a concept? Frustration rapidly gives way to anger as the storm rages. If those people wanted change, they should have come to me. I know change. Have you not seen what I've got in my silo? Do you not know how experienced I am? Who the hell are these people who tell me to do it differently? And after the anger dissipates, the storm still rages. But now we move into the stage of disappointment.